I'm currently on board the Disney Destiny, the newest ship in Disney's fleet. I came into this sailing expecting a familiar mix of charm, consistency, and the little touches that make a Disney cruise feel magic. We've sailed their earlier Wish class ships before, so I thought I had a pretty good idea of what to expect. But from the moment we arrived, it became clear that this cruise was not playing out the way we expected. A few small things started stacking early on, and then a few bigger ones followed, and by day 2, we were rethinking what we thought we even knew about how a Disney cruise was supposed to feel. So I've spent the last 4 days trying to understand whether the Destiny just needs more time to find its footing, or if this sailing revealed something more. As we approach the end of the cruise, that question has gotten a lot harder to answer than I even imagined. If you're ready, I am. Let's go. When it comes to Embarkation, Disney Cruise Line handles things a bit differently than everybody else in the cruise industry. And it seems like in their quest for better structure, they've actually created a slower and more frustrating experience for their guests. We arrived at Terminal 4 in Port Everglades, and the chaos started before we even got out of the car. We're sailing in concierge on this trip, which is Disney's suite experience, so that gave us access to the earliest port arrival time they offer, but it also means that previous guests from the earlier sailing were still making their way out of the port. And so as we were arriving, the folks working the port were directing us to where the departures were instead of where the arrivals were, and as such, we had to loop around a second time because we ended up in the wrong place the first time. And so as we arrived that second time, we tried to tell the people working, hey, we need to go over there to the luggage porters because we're actually just now arriving. And they still insisted that we go the wrong way. And so at this point, fortunately, a luggage porter saw what was happening and tried to explain to the person directing traffic, hey, they need to come over here because they need to drop their bags off. And they actually had to get in a small argument with the people directing traffic just to get us to be able to go drop our bags off. It was honestly a bit of a chaotic start, and not what we had in mind for the beginning of our magical vacation. And unfortunately, that was only the beginning of the confusion. After we dropped our bags off with a really friendly luggage porter, we made our way to the area where you're supposed to wait for your port arrival time, but there were no signs anywhere directing concierge guests where to go. And in fact, we asked 3 different people working at the terminal, hey, can you direct us to where we need to be? And none of them knew either. So it was a really confusing start. Eventually, some late arriving crew members did show up that were able to direct us to the right place, but it was a very confusing start. We had a port arrival time of 10:45 a.m., and to Disney's credit, they let us in right on schedule. Once we got inside, they checked our passports and our boarding documents and then sent us up to the concierge lounge, which is a floor above where the rest of folks are waiting to board the ship. They had some nice seating up there. Unfortunately, we were one of the earlier ones there, so we were able to get some of those seats because not everybody was as lucky. And we ended up waiting there for over an hour before we actually got to board the ship. So it was not the ideal boarding process at all. And especially when we were on this Celebrity Excel right before it, and that was another brand new ship. But when we got there, it was less than 15 minutes from the moment we got out of our car to the moments we took those first steps on board. So Disney, take some notes here. You guys really need to revamp your embarkation process. Once on board, we were directed to grab a concierge lunch at 1923, which we enjoyed the lunch, but if I'm honest, we would have rather had that extra hour to explore the ship while less people were on board. After lunch, we got the green light to drop our bags in our room, and it felt good to set everything down and switch into vacation mode. So we headed out to explore a little, but that window for exploration didn't last long because Disney still does a traditional old school muster drill. And so at 3 o'clock, we had to make our way to the Walt Disney Theater and spent the next hour sitting through the full presentation before the fun could officially begin. Walking into the grand hall as we boarded the Disney Destiny is one of those moments where the whole space pulls you in before you even realize it. The atrium is stunning in that very intentional Disney way. Every sightline is polished, every color choice feels purposeful, and you can tell they put real thought into the story this ship is trying to tell. The heroes and villains theme shows up in the carpets, the lighting, the artwork, and even in the tiny details you only notice if you slow down, and it creates an immersive world right out of the gate. What surprised me though was how familiar everything felt. Usually by the time a cruise line gets to the 3rd ship in the class, they start to make improvements based on what they saw didn't work as well as they thought it would on the earlier ships in that class. But on the Destiny, that's not the case. Outside of some rethemed venues, the layout and flow are identical to the Wish and the Treasure. It's still a beautiful ship, but if you've sailed the earlier ships, there's no major changes to look forward to exploring for the first time beyond some updated theming. But as we walked deeper into the ship, the personality of the Destiny started to show. It's vibrant without being loud, and the theming has plenty of personality without tipping into chaos. You can move from the Marvel themed atrium to a cozy lounge to a quiet hallway lined with original artwork, and each space has its own signature without breaking the overall story the ship is trying to tell. But even in that first walkthrough, something else started creeping in around the edges. The ship was already feeling fuller than we expected, and that early sense of beauty was slowly mixing with the realization that this was going to be a very crowded cruise. Those gorgeous open areas you admire at first glance suddenly felt a little tighter as they began to fill with people. Disney knows how to craft atmospheres that look complete, but I found myself wondering how well these spaces would function once the ship hit its full stride. And it didn't take long for the answer to that question to surface. The Destiny is a beautiful ship with thoughtful theming, a familiar layout, and an energy that's undeniably Disney. But as more and more people stepped on board, we started to get our first hints that the week ahead might feel a lot more crowded than we anticipated. After lunch and a quick walk around the ship, our room was ready, so we headed up to Deck 12 to check out our home for the next 4 days, cabin 12018. It's listed as a concierge level suite, which basically means it comes with an upgraded lounge and pool deck and a few other small amenities, but the room itself feels similar to what you would expect in a standard balcony cabin. For our family, though, it worked well. The cabin sleeps up to 5 people with a queen size bed for two, a sofa bed, a Pullman bunk that pulls down from the ceiling, and a Murphy bed that folds out from the wall. The first thing we noticed upon entering the room was the Fantasia theming. It's playful and it gives the room a warm, classic Disney feel without being over the top. The balcony is small but functional with 2 chairs and an end table, and even though it isn't a huge space, it was nice for having that little spot to catch some fresh air. Inside the room, the layout is surprisingly efficient. Disney's split bathroom design is still one of the smartest setups at sea, with a toilet and sink in one bathroom and a shower and sink in the other. It makes a big difference when everyone is getting ready at the same time. The water pressure in the shower was good throughout the week, though the temperature did drift between hot and cold here and there, and it wasn't really enough to be a problem, but it was definitely enough to notice. Storage was better than we expected. There are 2 large closets with plenty of hangers and a good amount of drawer space tucked throughout the room. We never struggled to find a home for anything, which is something you appreciate quickly on a family cruise. The bed has power outlets and light switches on both sides, which is somehow still a surprise even in 2025, as not all new cruise ships have that. And the bedding itself is extremely comfortable. What stood out most though was the service. We had 2 different room stewards and they're both incredibly friendly. They seem to have a sixth sense for when we're out of the cabin. They've kept everything spotless, refreshed, and organized without ever feeling intrusive. It's made the entire room feel like a calm reset point during a short 4 day sailing that was already starting to feel busy. Overall, it's a cozy, well designed cabin that gave our family plenty of space to sleep, recharge, and get ready each day. It doesn't have the footprint of a traditional suite, but the layout, storage, and service made it a comfortable home base. Our first dinner of the cruise was at Worlds of Marvel, and it's this dinner show built around Groot and a mix of Avengers characters with screens wrapping around the room and interactive moments. And instead of coming up with a fresh show for the Destiny, they just reused what they already had on the Treasure, which was a surprising cost-cutting measure for a cruise line that charges the premium that they do and prides themselves on being innovative. With that said, the concept is fun and it's usually one of the more lively meals on Disney ships, but the experience didn't land the way it normally does. Service was stretched thin from the moment we sat down, and the entrees didn't hit our table until more than 80 minutes after we got there. Several dishes were cold, and we were never offered refills a single time throughout the entire meal, which is crazy for a meal that lasted that long. And then the usual Disney touches like The conversations or the jokes or even magic tricks that the servers typically do with the kids, it just wasn't there at all. And the sense that your servers were a part of the experience and really just bringing that Disney magic, it just didn't land. Fortunately, Pride Lands gave us a completely different energy. This is the Lion King themed dining room with a central stage and a full music woven into the meal. The performers carried the room, and it was a truly great show, and the food was solid as well. It's one of those dinners where you forget you're even on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean for a few minutes. But I will say there was one oddity where the desserts weren't available because there was some sort of accident in the galley. They never offered any more details than that, so I can't comment on exactly what happened, but it was definitely a strange moment. But I suspect that's one of those where a brand new cruise ship moments versus a this is a sign of things to come. We had dinner at Palo Steakhouse one evening, and it was the kind of meal most people imagine when they think of premium dining at sea. The room feels calm and upscale with sweeping ocean views at the aft of the ship, and the service there had the polish we're used to with Disney Cruise Line. The Japanese Wagyu there was honestly one of the best steaks I've ever had on a cruise. But I got two steaks because they were only 6 ounces each, and the other was a Snake River Wagyu, which is basically an American version of Wagyu, and it didn't land quite the same. I always order my steaks medium rare, and the Japanese Wagyu was cooked a perfect medium rare, but the Snake River Wagyu was unfortunately well done. But even if it wasn't cooked wrong, it just didn't have the same flavor that the Japanese had. So I believe it was $62 for the Japanese Wagyu and 40 for the Snake River, but I would absolutely spend extra money to get the Japanese if we're ever there again. So the takeaway there, one plate stole the show and the other missed the mark, but overall the experience was definitely positive. This morning we had brunch at Palo Brunch and that didn't land quite the same. This was a meal that had more than 700 people on the waiting list to go there for brunch. So honestly, I was thinking this was going to be some sort of life-changing thing. And that might have been the mistake, is having those expectations. But the reality was the food is pretty good, but nothing spectacular. The service was overall good and friendly, but the experience lasted more than 2 hours, which in my opinion is far too long for brunch. So I would say overall for us, the experience did not live up to the hype. And our final meal at one of the rotational venues was 1923. And this is a venue that gives you that classic Disney dining feel. It's surrounded by artwork from early animations and a quieter atmosphere overall. And the room delivered on the aesthetic and the food was solid, but the personal connection we normally have with servers in the restaurants on Disney just wasn't there. It was polite and efficient, but it was missing that extra spark that Disney is known for. And look, if I'm honest, guys, the casual dining ended up being the strongest part of the entire food experience. Marceline Market, which is the buffet on the Destiny, has a wide range of options and it was all fresh and well prepared, and the layout made it easy to find something good without having to weave through crowds. And Mickey's Festival of Foods hit the mark as well. This is a casual grab and go sort of area with a variety of different menu options, or whether it was the barbecue or the burritos or the pizza or the burgers, they were all just really, really good. I was really impressed. And look, one thing that I'm going to mention here because it had people in the Facebook group what like honestly up in arms is that the churro waffles were removed from all the main public dining spaces. They still had them in the concierge lounge, and the kids actually got them for breakfast this morning, but it took more than an hour to get them, which for an area where you're paying $3,000 a night to be there and supposed to be premium and another level of service, that just doesn't hit the mark. And so as we reach the final night of this 4-day sailing, as the sun sets behind me, the trend that I've seen here that is impossible to ignore is that the food has been consistently good, but the service has been lacking. Some meals have moved at a crawl and others felt rushed, and the usual Disney charm has just never surfaced. Guys, look, this isn't just me being an overly critical YouTube reviewer. This has been something that people have been saying across the ship. It's been consistent for everybody on board. So the question is really is this just the growing pains of a new ship? Or is Disney kind of losing what made them special and worth the premium that you pay? The more we explored the ship, the more the personality of the Destiny came into focus. The spaces themselves look incredible. Disney clearly poured attention into the theming, the lighting, and the little hero and villain touches woven into the central decks. But as we moved from venue to venue, the crowd levels on this sailing started to overshadow the charm. The Grand Hall is the centerpiece of the ship, and it's one of the most impressive atrium spaces Disney has ever built. It's immersive and packed with character meet and greets throughout the day. And on paper, it should be a spot where you can just kind of hang out and linger as the energy changes throughout the day. But in reality, it was almost always wall to wall with people. Photographers lined the edges, character lines stretched across the floor, and even the upper levels felt busy. It was beautiful to look at, but tough to enjoy for more than a quick pass through. Just off the atrium, venues like the Haunted Mansion Parlor and the Sanctum Lounge should have been perfect places to unwind. They're both beautifully themed and filled with details Disney fans would normally love to take their time with. But getting into them was the real challenge. These spaces stayed full from open to close and seats disappeared almost instantly. The Cask and Cannon pub has a great nautical feel with its Pirates of the Caribbean inspiration, and it might be one of the most fitting concepts on the entire ship. But even so, the crowds made it tough to actually sit and enjoy it. Every time we stopped in, the place was slammed, and it became another venue we just couldn't meaningfully experience because there wasn't a chair to be found. The Triton Lounge offered a different type of atmosphere. It's mostly used for trivia and meetups with a simple and straightforward design. Even here, though, capacity filled quickly. Events would start, seats would vanish, and guests ended up standing along the walls or leaving altogether. Up on the outdoor decks, the crowding became even more noticeable. The main pool area was packed from morning to evening, and the Aqua Mouse line seemed to be longer every time we passed by. Finding quiet anywhere on the ship was a challenge. Bar seating was consistently taken over by teenagers, lounges filled early and stayed that way, and even hallway seating was occupied. There were also kids roaming the halls and actually stealing fish extenders that weren't intended for them, which added a layer of disruption for families that were trying to take in the traditions in the right way. Now, with all of that said, the spot that became our absolute favorite on board was the Rose. This is the Beauty and the Beast themed lounge at the aft of Deck 12, and it is a truly incredible space. The bar is quiet, and the bartenders there, Kelvin and Lucia, were absolutely amazing. In fact, Kelvin makes an incredible tequila old fashioned that became my favorite on this sailing. The dark design with gold accents really set the mood of the space, and honestly, this was a spot where you could go and just get away from the crowds. In fact, on night one, we were some of the only people up there. We were able to just really connect with people and have meaningful conversations, and well, that meant the world to us. And one other spot that gave us a break from the crowds was at the very forward of the ship. The bow on the Destiny is only accessible from the outdoor promenades on Deck 4, Deck 5, and taking the stairs up to Deck 6. I went up there twice during the sailing, and both times I was the only person there. Now, it's a simple lookout area, but the views are incredible. You've got sweeping, unobstructed views of the ocean, and standing there with the bow cutting through the water felt peaceful in a way that nothing else on the ship really did. It was also really cool being able to look up at the bridge from the forward of the ship with the bridge actually behind you. Overall, the Destiny is packed with creative venues and thoughtful design, and the ship itself is impressive in so many ways. But the crowd levels made it difficult to really lose yourself in the spaces the way that we wanted. Almost everywhere we went told the same story. It's a beautiful space and a great concept, but there's too many people for it to feel relaxing or easy to enjoy. The entertainment on the Destiny is one area where you can tell Disney really went all in and they put their hearts into the experience. The ship has two big production shows, which were Frozen and Hercules, and both were incredibly well done. We had seen Frozen once on another ship before, so we knew what to expect, but the cast delivered a great performance, and Hercules ended up being the stronger of the two with some really impressive vocals. In fact, the lines for Hercules began 3 hours before showtime and stretched all the way back to the Grand Hall by the time they opened the doors, which is Crazy. It speaks of how excited people were, but it also meant you had to commit a big chunk of your day if you wanted to get good seats. Character meet and greets happened all throughout the ship, and both the heroes and the villains had steady crowds wherever they appeared. It's fun seeing characters around every corner, especially on a ship with this theme, but the photo op lines were consistently long. They're great for families who build their cruise around character interactions, but tough if you were hoping for more spontaneous interactions with the characters. And the Hero Zone ended up being one of the most popular areas for families, especially with the inflatable obstacle course setup. Our kids absolutely loved it, and they thought the long line was, well, it was worth it. We rode the Aqua Mouse as well, which is the headline water attraction on the Destiny. It's the same basic slide you'll find on the Wish and the Treasure, complete with show scenes before the water coaster portion kicks in. It's fun and it's worth doing once or twice, but it wasn't anything new for guests who have sailed on these other ships in the class. The line stayed long throughout the day, thanks in part to constant mechanical breakdowns they're still experiencing on the third iteration of this slide, which made it more of a pick your moment carefully activity than something you just hop on casually. Now, day three brought one of the more unique entertainment moments on the ship, which is when they showed the premiere of Zootopia 2 in the main theater. Disney likes to offer early screenings on select sailings, and this one pulled a massive crowd with the Walt Disney Theater filled to capacity. But I will say, our kids enjoyed being part of a premiere at sea, even if it meant replacing a production show for one night. Between the stage productions, the movies, the characters, the Hero Zone, and all the daily activities packed into the schedule, there's no question Disney knows how to deliver entertainment across the ship. Even with the crowds and long lines, they consistently put on a strong lineup that kept the ship buzzing from morning to night. This sailing taught us a few things we'll carry into any future sailings on this class of ship. Pallet brunch can honestly stay off the list next time. The food was good, but the 2+ hour commitment just didn't feel worth it, especially on a shorter sailing like this one where the mornings move fast. I'd rather spend that time exploring the ship or relaxing instead of watching the clock in the dining room. We'll also come into any future Disney cruise with a bit more patience in the bag. Disney ships are always lively, but this one was especially busy because of the shorter itinerary. People stayed in motion from morning to night, and the ship never really had that quiet pocket where you could just decompress. Expecting that level of energy going in would have made the pace feel less surprising and a bit less chaotic as well. And honestly, one of the biggest surprises and biggest disappointments is understanding that concierge just isn't worth it on Disney. The lounge and the sun deck and the early boarding, none of it really just justified the enormous price premium, and this service just didn't feel elevated in any meaningful way. Often the concierge lounge was honestly one of the most crowded areas of the entire ship, so this is an easy box to skip on any future booking. One thing we'll definitely plan differently in the future is how we approach the big headliner attractions. The Aqua Mouse line stay long for pretty much the entirety of its opening hours, and so the best move is to ride it as soon as it opens at 10 a.m. or to do it during dinner hours before it closes at 7 p.m. when most guests are elsewhere on the ship. Trying to squeeze it in during the middle of the day turns it into a long wait for a short ride. And after seeing how chaotic the character meet and greet lines were, we'll also use the app more strategically next time. Timing your meets around port days or late evening windows makes a huge difference. It takes a bit of planning, but it keeps you from standing in lines that stretch across the entire Grand Hall. Now look, here's the reality. None of these were deal breakers, but these small adjustments will make a future sailing a lot less stressful. Every ship teaches you something different, and the Destiny made it clear where to spend our time and where not to spend our time so we can make the most of it the next time around. Our time on the Disney Destiny gave us plenty to talk about. The ship is packed with creativity, impressive theming, and entertainment that shows why Disney still sits near the top when it comes to storytelling at sea. But this sailing also highlighted the parts of the experience that didn't quite hit the standard we've come to expect from Disney. It wasn't a bad cruise, but it was a very different one that required a lot more patience than normal, and it made us rethink what really matters most to us on a Disney vacation. And that's the part that really stayed with me. Every ship in the fleet has its own personality, and what feels magical on one sailing can feel overwhelming on another, and knowing how to navigate those differences will make a huge impact on your trip. So, if you're planning a Disney cruise or trying to make the most of the one you already booked, I put together a video that breaks down all the little known secrets, shortcuts, and insider tips that will make sure you make the most of your Disney cruise. So, don't stop here. Come hang out with me in that one next, where I'll show you where the real value is hiding, how to avoid the friction points, and how to get the most out of your time on board without spending more money. If you're ready, I am. Let's go.